Have you ever stared at a grocery receipt, looked at the total, and asked yourself a genuinely terrifying question? I am working harder than I've ever worked in my life, so why do I feel like I am getting poorer? It's a sinking feeling that sits in the pit of your stomach. You get a raise, maybe a seemingly decent 3% or 4% bump, but by the time that money hits your account, it feels like it has already evaporated. The gas pump takes more. The rent takes more. The very basics of survival seem to be eating a larger slice of your life every single month. Have you passed through this? That moment where you realize the math just isn't adding up anymore. If you turn on the news, they have a million excuses ready for you. They'll tell you it's the supply chain disruptions. They'll blame a war halfway across the world. They'll tell you it's just a temporary market adjustment or the result of post-pandemic demand. They use complex jargon to make you feel like this is just the weather, an unpredictable storm that nobody could control. But what if I told you that is a lie? What if I told you that the erosion of your purchasing power isn't an accident, it isn't bad luck, and it certainly isn't a natural disaster? What we are witnessing is a crime scene. But unlike a robbery where someone smashes your window and takes your TV, this crime is silent, it's invisible. And worst of all, it is legal. Welcome to the scene of the crime of the modern economy. We need to talk about the hidden tax. Most people think of taxes as the line item on their paycheck or the check they write to the IRS in April. But there is another tax, one that was never voted on by Congress, never debated in the Senate, and never approved by you. It is the tax of inflation. But here is the twist that the financial news channels rarely discuss. Inflation isn't just prices going up. That is a symptom, not the disease. Inflation is actually a mechanism of wealth transfer. Think about it. While your savings are buying less and less, looking at the other side of town at Wall Street reveals a completely different reality. Corporate profits are hitting record highs. The stock market decouples from reality, soaring while Main Street struggles to buy eggs. What you are going to discover now might surprise you because it flips the entire narrative on its head. This isn't the system failing. This is the system working exactly as it was designed. We are taught that capitalism is about risk and reward. If you make a bad bet, you lose money. If a business fails, it closes. But that rule only applies to you and me. It applies to the bakery on the corner and the local mechanic. It does not apply to the financial giants. Over the last few decades, we have seen the rise of a new model, the corporate bailout. But they don't always do it by writing a direct check anymore. That's too obvious. It makes people too angry. Instead, they use inflation. They print new money to prop up failing institutions, to buy toxic assets, and to keep the liquidity flowing to the too big to fail crowd. And who pays for that new money? You do. You pay for it every time your dollar buys a little bit less than it did yesterday. The inflation you experience is essentially the bill for their bailout. It is the architectural blueprint of a rigged game where the costs are socialized among the working class, while the profits are privatized by the elite. Stay with me until the end, because we are going to dismantle this engine, piece by piece. We need to stop looking at charts and numbers as boring data and start looking at them as evidence in a grand larceny case. We need to understand not just that we are being robbed, but how the heist is pulled off without setting off a single alarm. To understand how this mechanism truly works, how the money flows from the printing press into the pockets of the few before the inflation hits the many, we have to look at the weapon used in this crime. It's a concept that dates back to the 18th century, a secret that explains why the rich get richer, specifically because the poor get poorer during inflationary periods. It has a mechanism so subtle that most people never see it coming until it's too late. Before we pull back the curtain on exactly what that mechanism is, and trust me, once you see it, you cannot unsee it, I want to take a brief moment to acknowledge the weight of what we are discussing here. We aren't just talking about economic theory or lines on a graph. We are talking about the hours of your life that you trade for a paycheck, only to watch the value of that labor dissolve. It's personal and it's frustrating. If this reality hits home for you, or if you have felt that exhaustion of running faster just to stay in the same place, I want to hear from you. Leave a comment below sharing your own experience, or simply let me know what you think about this shift in perspective. If this subject makes sense to you, tell me in the comments what touched a nerve. Your voice actually matters here because the mainstream financial narrative relies entirely on our silence and confusion. And if you believe this kind of investigative history is vital, if you think more people need to wake up to how the machine actually operates, please take a second to hit that like button and subscribe to the channel. It might seem like a small action, but your participation is exactly what allows this channel to grow and break through the noise to reach others who need to hear this message. We are building a community here that values the hard truth over comfortable lies, and I want you to be a part of it. So, with that said, let's go back to the evidence. Let's look at that weapon I mentioned, the specific tool that turns money creation into a method of theft. It has a name, it has a history, and it explains why the money never seems to trickle down. To understand the murder weapon used in the silent crime, we have to travel back in time, long before the Federal Reserve or the sophisticated algorithms of modern Wall Street existed. We need to go back to the early 18th century to meet an Irish-French banker named Richard Cantillon. While most economists today are obsessed with complex averages and general price levels, Cantillon saw something far more sinister and far more accurate about the nature of money. He realized that the hidden truth of economics wasn't about how much money existed, but where it entered the economy first. He discovered that money is not neutral. It doesn't affect everyone equally at the same time. This discovery, known as the Cantillon Effect, is the key to unlocking the mystery of why wealth inequality seems to explode every time the government tries to save the economy. Think of the economy as a dry sponge and new money as water being poured onto just one corner of it. The corner where the water hits first gets soaked immediately. It becomes saturated, heavy with liquid, but the far corner of the sponge, it stays dry for a long time. Eventually, the moisture might seep through, but by the time it gets there, the water has been absorbed, evaporated, or used up. In our modern financial system, that water isn't just plain H2O. It's thick, sticky honey. Imagine the Federal Reserve pouring a massive jar of honey into the economy. Who is standing right directly under the jar? It's not you. It's not the small business owner on Main Street. It's the government, the massive commercial banks, and the connected financial elite. They are the ones with their mouths open, catching the honey while it is still pure, thick, and concentrated. This is where the transformation of wealth happens. When these institutions get this newly created money, they are getting it at its maximum value. The prices of goods and services in the real economy haven't changed yet because the money hasn't circulated yet. It is a moment of arbitrage that only the privileged few have access to. So, what do they do with this fresh capital? They don't buy milk and eggs. They go out and buy assets. They buy stocks, they buy real estate, they buy bonds, and they acquire companies. Because they are flush with cash, their demand drives up the price of these assets. This creates a massive boom in the stock market and property values. If you are already rich and own assets, you feel like a genius. Your portfolio is skyrocketing. You are celebrating the recovery. But for the rest of us, the journey of that money is just beginning, and it is a painful one. As the money moves from the banks to the corporations and then slowly trickles down through the tiers of the economy, it starts to bid up prices everywhere it goes. By the time that money finally reaches your paycheck, if it ever does, the damage has already been done. The revelations of the Cantillon Effect show us that by the time the extra liquidity reaches the working class, the cost of living has already risen to absorb it. The housing market is now more expensive because the private equity firms bought all the starter homes with cheap money. The cost of food is higher, the cost of fuel is up. You are receiving the money only after it has lost its purchasing power. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject, because understanding this changes your entire mindset about how the system is rigged. It isn't just that prices are going up. It is that the value of your labor is being siphoned off to subsidize the asset purchases of the elite. This acts as a regressive redistribution of wealth. When the government prints money to pay its bills or bail out a bank, they are effectively stealing value from every dollar you have saved in your bank account and transferring it to the recipients of the new money. It is a subtle, invisible mechanism, but the impact is devastating. You are running a race where the finish line is constantly being moved further away by the very people refereeing the game. This brings us to the uncomfortable reality of decisions made behind closed doors. When a crisis hits, the decision to inject trillions into the system is often sold to the public as a necessary measure to help everyone. They use words like stimulus or relief, but if you look at the bastidors, the backstage of these policies, you see that the plumbing of the financial system is designed to trap that value at the top. It creates a distinct class divide: those who benefit from inflation, asset owners and debtors closer to the money printer, and those who are crushed by it, wage earners and savers. The crime of 1913, when the structure was formalized, was essentially the creation of a permanent engine for this transfer. Consider the psychological toll this takes. You feel like you are making the right choices. You study, you work, you save, but the ledger is being rewritten against you in real time. This is why you see luxury brands posting record profits while discount grocery stores are seeing more traffic than ever. The economy splits in two. The Cantillon insiders are living in a roaring 20s boom fueled by cheap credit and asset inflation. The Cantillon outsiders, that's us, are living in a depression of purchasing power, struggling to maintain a standard of living that was considered normal just a generation ago. It creates a sensation of gaslighting, where the official numbers say the economy is growing, but your personal reality feels like it is shrinking. This isn't a conspiracy theory. It is the mechanics of central banking. It is the architecture of how fiat currency operates. The money is not intended to be a store of value for you. It is intended to be a flow of liquidity for them. When you grasp this, you stop blaming the shopkeeper for high prices and start looking at the source of the flood. You realize that the inflation you fight against daily is actually the corporate bailout happening in slow motion, funded by the depreciation of your life's work. It is a hard pill to swallow, but acknowledging it is the first step in protecting yourself. This dynamic sets the stage for a culture of corruption where the incentive isn't to be productive, but to be close to the spigot. Why innovate when you can just lobby for cheap money? Why build a better product when you can use low-interest loans to buy back your own stock and inflate your bonus? The system rewards proximity to power over utility to society. If this explanation has turned a light bulb on for you, if you are starting to see the invisible lines connecting the printing press to your grocery bill, I want to know. Drop a comment below and simply write, "I see the game now." Let's create a record of how many of us are waking up to this reality. But understanding the weapon is only half the battle. Now that we know how they steal the value, we need to look at the specific modus operandi they use to justify it. We need to examine how they have convinced the world that this legalized looting is actually for our own good, and how they turned too big to fail into a permanent hostage situation for the American taxpayer. In the real world, the world where you and I live, work, and try to build a life, capitalism has a very simple, brutal set of rules. It is a system built on the duality of risk and reward. If you decide to open a small bakery, you put your savings on the line. You wake up at 4 a.m. every day to knead the dough. If your bread is good and your prices are fair, you make a profit. That is your reward. But if you mismanage your inventory, or if customers simply prefer the shop across the street, you fail. You close your doors. You might lose your savings, your credit score tanks, and you have to start over from scratch. There is no safety net woven out of tax dollars to catch you. That is the cold, hard reality of the free market. It forces you to be prudent, to calculate your moves, and to take responsibility for your decisions. But if you take a cab from your neighborhood and drive down to the financial district, you cross an invisible border into a completely different universe. You leave the land of capitalism and enter the kingdom of crony capitalism. Here, the rules of the game have undergone a complete transformation. In this world, the connection between risk and failure has been severed. It is a place where the mindset isn't about building value, but about extracting it. This is where we encounter the true modus operandi of Wall Street, the privatization of profits and the socialization of losses. It is the most sophisticated protection racket in human history, and it operates under the guise of high finance. To understand how this machinery works, we don't have to look very far back into the history books. We just have to look at 2008. This was the moment the mask slipped, and the hidden truth was revealed to everyone who was paying attention. The giant investment banks, the insurers, and the hedge funds had spent years making reckless bets on subprime mortgages. They were leveraging themselves to the moon, taking risks that were frankly insane, driven by greed and the pursuit of short-term bonuses. For years, they pocketed billions in profits. They bought penthouses, private jets, and politicians. They privatized those gains. It was their money. But when the music stopped and the house of cards collapsed, did they face the consequences of their failure? Did they go broke like the baker would have? No, they held the global economy hostage. They went to the government and said, "We are too big to fail. If we go down, we take everyone with us." Or rather, the government, which is often populated by former executives of these very same banks, opened the floodgates. The backstage negotiations resulted in massive bailouts. The losses, which should have wiped out the shareholders and executives who made the bad bets, were suddenly transferred to the public ledger. They were socialized. You, the taxpayer, and you, the holder of US dollars, were put on the hook for their gambling debts. Now I want to go even deeper into the subject because the impact of this goes beyond just a one-time payment. This established a moral hazard that has poisoned the entire economic system. Once you teach a gambler that the casino will refund his losses but let him keep his winnings, how do you think he is going to bet next time? He is going to bet bigger. He is going to take even more insane risks. And that is exactly what we saw leading up to 2020. When the pandemic hit, the precedent had already been set. The markets didn't even have to ask, they expected the rescue. And they got it on a scale that made 2008 look like pocket change. Trillions of dollars were printed and injected into the corporate bond markets, essentially making the Federal Reserve the buyer of last resort for corporate debt. This is the journey of the modern dollar. It starts as a bailout for a failing corporation and ends as inflation at your grocery store. When we say they socialize the losses, they aren't sending you a bill in the mail asking for $5,000 to save a bank. That would cause a revolution. Instead, they do it through the currency. They print the money to fill the hole in the bank's balance sheet. This new money dilutes the pool. It lowers the purchasing power of every dollar you earn through your hard work. So, when you see the price of meat double or the cost of a used car skyrocket, you are effectively paying the deductible on Wall Street's insurance policy. You are paying for the mistakes of CEOs who are likely sipping champagne on a yacht while you clip coupons. It is a system designed to strip mine the wealth of the middle class to protect the assets of the elite. The revelations of this model show us that Wall Street isn't really a center of capital allocation anymore. It is a center of capital extraction. They have turned the entire economy into a mechanism that funnels wealth upward. In a true market, bankruptcy is the cleansing fire that clears out dead wood and allows new, healthy growth. By preventing bankruptcy for the elite, they have created a zombie economy kept alive only by constant transfusions of your purchasing power. This changes the way we have to look at success in this country. We grow up believing that if you provide value, you succeed. But the bastidors, the behind-the-scenes reality tells us that in the upper echelons, success is determined by your proximity to the money printer. It is about access, not merit. The decisions made by central bankers to suppress interest rates and monetize debt are not technical adjustments. They are political choices to prioritize asset prices over the cost of living. They are choosing the health of the stock market over the health of your savings account. And the most brilliant part of this scheme? They have convinced the public that this is all necessary for stability. They tell you that if they didn't bail out these criminal enterprises, the ATMs would stop working and society would collapse. They use fear to justify the theft. But the reality is that they are protecting their own class interests at the expense of everyone else. The inflation you are struggling with right now is not an accident. It is the inevitable mathematical result of a system that refuses to let the rich face the consequences of their own actions. It is the receipt for the bailout, and it has been slipped into your pocket while you weren't looking. This realization can be heavy. It challenges the mindset that the system is fair or that the playing field is level. It forces us to accept that we are playing a game where the referee is betting on the other team. But seeing this clearly is the only way to navigate it. You cannot protect yourself from a trap you don't know exists. When you understand that inflation is the corporate bailout mechanism, you stop waiting for prices to come down and start understanding why they are being pushed up. If this analysis resonates with you, if you can feel the truth of this double standard in your own life, I want to hear it. Drop a comment below and write, "I am tired of paying the bill." Let us show them that we know exactly who is eating the fancy dinner and who is stuck washing the dishes. But how do they get away with this year after year? How do they sell this corrupt model to the public without causing mass unrest? They do it by controlling the language. They use a specific set of words, a rhetoric of stability, to hide the reality of what they are doing. They cloak their crime in the boring gray language of bureaucracy so that you tune out. The greatest trick the devil ever pulled wasn't convincing the world he didn't exist. It was convincing the world that theft was actually economic policy. If a stranger walked into your house and started taking furniture to pay off his gambling debts, you would call the police. But when the financial elite does the exact same thing to the value of your savings, they don't call it theft. They hire PR firms, lobbyists, and economists to rebrand it. They create a sophisticated curtain of smoke designed to bore you into submission and confuse you into silence. They use terms that sound clinical, academic, and incredibly complicated, specifically so that you will tune out and leave the decisions to the experts. This is the rhetoric of stability. It is the language of the cover-up. You hear phrases like quantitative easing, liquidity injection, yield curve control, or asset purchases. These sound like necessary, high-level maintenance of a complex machine. But let's translate this from banker speak into plain English. Quantitative easing is simply a polite euphemism for counterfeiting on a massive scale. It is the act of creating currency out of thin air to buy bad debts from friends. If you or I did this in our basement with a color printer, we would be locked in a federal prison for decades. When the Federal Reserve does it, they are praised on the cover of financial magazines for saving the economy. But here is the question that cracks the foundation of their entire narrative. When they say they are saving the economy, whose economy are they talking about? Are they talking about your economy? The economy of the single mother trying to stretch a paycheck to cover rent and groceries. The economy of the small business owner facing rise in supplier costs. No, when they say the economy, they mean the asset bubbles. They mean the stock market. They mean the bond market. They mean the real estate portfolios of the ultra-wealthy. There is a hidden truth here that they are desperate to keep buried. The stock market is not the economy. In fact, over the last decade, the stock market has become a parasite on the real economy, feeding off the liquidity that drains value from your pocket. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject, because the transformation of this language has a direct psychological impact on how we perceive our own struggles. They tell us that inflation is a sign of growth, or that it was transitory, a little bump in the road. Do you remember that? For months, they looked into the camera and told you that the rising prices were temporary. They gaslit an entire population. They knew the money supply had exploded. They knew the math. But they relied on the authority of their position to keep you calm while the transfer of wealth took place. This is a battle for your mindset. They want you to believe that these forces are like the weather, uncontrollable and natural rather than the direct result of human choices made in the bastidors of power. The mechanism is deviously simple. When they inject this liquidity, it flows first into financial assets. This inflates the price of stocks and bonds. Who owns those assets? The top 10% of the population owns nearly 90% of the stocks. So the rich get richer. They see their net worth balloon. They feel like geniuses. But where does that money go next? It chases real goods. It chases housing. It bids up the price of land. And this is where the knife twists. While the injection inflates the assets of the rich, it inflates the living costs of the poor. The rich see their portfolio go up. You see your rent go up. The rich see their dividends rise. You see the price of eggs rise. It is the exact same mechanism, but it produces two opposite realities. For them, it is a boom. For you, it is a crisis. This is the architecture of modern inequality. It is not an accidental byproduct of capitalism. It is a feature of central banking. By the time the impact reaches Main Street, the narrative has already been set. The media, which relies on access to these financial power players, parrots the official line. They celebrate record highs in the Dow Jones as if that helps the factory worker whose real wage has dropped by 5% this year. They create a dissonance between what you hear on the news and what you feel at the checkout counter. This gap is where the frustration breeds. You feel crazy because the data says everything is fine, but your bank account is bleeding. Think about the journey you are on. You are trying to build security, maybe leave something for your children, but you are swimming upstream against a current designed to push you back. This system relies on your ignorance. It relies on you hearing quantitative easing and thinking, oh, that sounds technical. The smart people have it under control. If they called it currency devaluation to bail out hedge funds, there would be riots in the streets tomorrow. Language is their first line of defense. They hide the revelations of their corruption behind a wall of jargon. It is the greatest wealth transfer scheme in history, operating in broad daylight, sanctioned by the state and defended by the press. They are privatizing the gains of the boom times and socializing the losses of the bust times, all while telling you it is for your own safety. They claim that without these measures, the system would collapse. And perhaps the rigged system would collapse. Perhaps the zombie companies would fail. Perhaps the reckless banks would go under. But that is exactly what should happen in a healthy economy. By preventing that cleansing fire, they have turned the entire economy into a patient on life support, where the medicine, money printing, is actually the poison killing the host, the currency. We need to stop accepting their dictionary. We need to stop nodding along when they use these buzzwords. We need to recognize that every time they announce a new stimulus or a new rescue package, they are effectively announcing a future tax hike on your standard of living. They are diluting your labor. They are stealing the time you spent working. If you are starting to see through the fog, if you are realizing that their stability is actually just a slow-motion robbery of your future, let's mark this moment. I want you to go to the comments right now and write one simple phrase. I do and believe the hype. Let them know that we are learning their language and we aren't buying it anymore. But now that we have stripped away the fancy words and seen the mechanism for what it is, we are left with a very ugly picture. If this isn't incompetence and if it isn't an accident, then what is it? When a group of people conspires to manipulate a market to extract wealth from the public, we usually have a name for that. We don't call it economics, we call it organized crime, and that is exactly how we need to analyze the structure of Wall Street. If we strip away the expensive suits, the marble lobbies, and the Ivy League credentials, we are left with a very simple definition of what is happening. If you or I gathered a group of friends in a basement and conspired to manipulate the supply of money to ensure our own debts were paid while everyone else's savings lost value, we would be raided by the FBI. We would be charged with racketeering, fraud, and counterfeiting. It would be a federal crime punishable by decades in prison. But when this exact same process is conducted behind the closed doors of the Federal Reserve and the major banking institutions, it is not called a crime. It is called monetary policy. It is called quantitative easing. It is lauded as necessary intervention. But make no mistake, the act is identical. Only the legality has changed. This brings us to the core of the issue, the hidden truth that transforms this from a story about economics into a story about crime. We are looking at the operation of a state-protected cartel. In a functional free market, businesses compete to provide value. They have to build better cars, bake better bread, or write better software to earn your money. But Wall Street has undergone a transformation. They realized decades ago that producing real value is hard, risky, and expensive. It is much easier and far more profitable to extract value from the currency itself. They do need to build a better factory if they can simply lobby for a policy that devalues the wages of the workers and inflates the assets of the shareholders. The modus operandi here is parasitic. Wall Street has effectively become a toll booth on the highway of the American economy. They are not generating the wealth, they are skimming it. And the mechanism they use to skim it is inflation. Every time the money supply is expanded to cover a bad bet or a budget deficit, it acts as a siphon. It drains the purchasing power from the pockets of the middle class, the people who actually produce goods and services, and transfers it to the balance sheets of the financial sector. This is not an unintended side effect. It is the business model. The impact of this is that the financial sector has grown to engulf the real economy. It has become a monster that must be fed constantly with cheaper and cheaper money, or else it threatens to devour the host. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because understanding this requires a fundamental shift in mindset. We are conditioned to think of the government and the banks as separate entities. We think the government regulates the banks. But the revelations of the last century of financial history show us that they have merged into a single entity of power. The government needs the banks to buy its debt so it can spend without raising taxes. The banks need the government to protect them from bankruptcy and provide them with free money. It is a symbiotic relationship of corruption. They scratch each other's backs and you pay for the manicure. This is the architecture of corruption in its purest form. It is white-collar crime legalized by the very people committing it. Think about the decisions that are made during a financial crisis. Who is in the room? It is the Treasury Secretary, often a former Goldman Sachs executive, meeting with the chairman of the Federal Reserve, often a future hedge fund advisor, meeting with the CEOs of the too-big-to-fail banks. There is no representative for the saver. There is no representative for the retiree living on a fixed income. There is no representative for the young couple trying to buy their first home. The bastidors, the backstage machinations are entirely controlled by the beneficiaries of the inflation. This is why the gap between the rich and the poor is widening at a historic pace. It is not because the rich are working 1,000 times harder than they did in 1970. It is because the money itself has been weaponized. When you work for a currency that is being debased, you are running on a treadmill that is being sped up by the people you are trying to catch. You are trading your finite time, the most precious resource you have, for a currency that they can print infinite amounts of. It is a theft of life. It is a theft of the energy you put into the world. When we look at this journey of financial decline, we have to stop calling it capitalism. Capitalism requires failure. It requires risk. What we have is a command and control economy run for the benefit of a financial oligarchy. It is a cartel that has captured the regulatory state. They have privatized the profit-making machinery and socialized the risk-taking machinery. If they win, they buy a third home. If they lose, you pay higher prices at the gas pump. That is the deal. And they have the audacity to call this economic health. The outrage you might be feeling right now is justified. In fact, it is necessary. Because once you see Wall Street not as a center of commerce, but as a crime scene where the evidence is hidden in plain sight, everything changes. You stop listening to their experts on TV. You stop believing that they have your best interests at heart. You realize that you are in a negotiation with a counterparty that is cheating. And the only way to win a rigged game is to understand the rules better than the people playing you. This leads us to the most critical question of all. If the game is rigged, if the house always wins, and if the currency is the tool of your oppression, what can you actually do? Is there a way to opt out of this system? Is there a way to insulate your life and your family from this constant erosion of value? Because if we just stop here, we are just victims. But we are not victims. We are people who are waking up. And there are strategies, historical strategies, that have been used for centuries to survive exactly this kind of colorinho branco looting. If this definition of the system as a cartel rather than a market rings true to you, if you can see the strings being pulled, I want you to confirm it. Go to the comments right now and type, "It's a rigged game." Let's see how many of us are done pretending that this is normal. But now that we have identified the crime, the weapon, and the criminals, we have to talk about the defense. We have to talk about how you can build a fortress around your wealth that inflation cannot breach. We need to move from anger to action. We have reached a point of no return in this conversation. We have indicted the system, presented the evidence, and found the crime of the century guilty on all counts. But here is the hard reality we have to face. There is no police force coming to arrest the perpetrators. There is no judge who is going to sentence the Federal Reserve to prison. The verdict in this trial isn't going to come from a courtroom. It has to come from you. It has to come from a fundamental shift in your own mindset. Anger is a natural reaction, in fact. It's the appropriate reaction, but anger without a plan is just wasted energy. If you stay in the phase of outrage, you are still a victim. And the entire goal of this journey we are on is to stop being the victim and start being the architect of your own survival. Now that you know who the villain is, the cartel of crony capitalism, and you know what the weapon is, inflation, currency, devaluation, you have a massive advantage over 99% of the population. The vast majority of people are still operating under the old rules. They believe that if they work hard and save their dollars in a bank account, they are being responsible. The hidden truth is that in a fiat currency system, savers are losers. That sounds harsh, but it is the mathematical reality. The currency is programmed to lose value. It is designed to melt. Holding your wealth in paper dollars is like trying to carry water in a bucket full of holes. The decisions you make based on this realization will determine whether you sink with the ship or build a life raft. This requires a complete transformation of how you view money. You have to stop viewing money as a store of value and start viewing it as a medium of exchange that is rapidly decaying. The bastidors, the backstage mechanics of the system, are set up to punish those who hold the currency and reward those who hold assets. The elite know this. That is why they don't keep their millions in a savings account earning 0.1% interest. They keep their wealth in things that the government cannot print: real estate, gold, commodities, businesses, and scarce digital assets. They position themselves to benefit from the flood of liquidity rather than being drowned by it. To protect yourself, you have to adopt their strategy. You have to stop saving in the currency of the victim and start saving in the assets of the victor. Now I want to go even deeper into this subject because this is where the rubber meets the road. This isn't just about financial tactics. It's about intellectual self-defense. The most powerful asset you can own is not a bar of gold. It is your understanding of history. The revelations we've discussed today are not unique to our time. The Romans debased the denarius to pay for wars and bread in circuses. The Weimar Republic printed the mark until it was used as wallpaper. This story has played out dozens of times in history, and the ending is always the same: the transfer of wealth from the common people to the state and its cronies. When you understand this historical arc, the daily news stops being confusing and starts being predictable. You stop waiting for the system to go back to normal because you realize that the inflation, the manipulation, the bailouts is the new normal. It is the system functioning exactly as it was designed to function. The impact of this realization is liberating. You stop looking for a political savior. You realize that no president or prime minister is going to turn off the money printer, because doing so would crash the system they depend on. The cavalry is not coming. You are the cavalry. This means taking radical responsibility for your financial education. It means understanding that every dollar you earn is a claim on society's resources that is expiring. You need to convert that expiring claim into something permanent as quickly as possible. This is the only way to opt out of the hidden tax. You can't stop them from printing money, but you can choose not to hold the thing they are printing. This path is not easy. It requires you to go against the herd. When everyone else is panicking about prices, you need to be calm, calculating, and strategic. It requires you to make decisions that might seem risky to your friends and family who are still asleep in the matrix. They will tell you to play it safe, to put your money in the bank, to trust the experts. But you know better now. You know that safe is actually the riskiest place to be. You know that the truth is hidden under layers of complex jargon and rhetoric of stability. By stepping out of the victim mentality, you are reclaiming the value of your labor. You are refusing to let your life's work be siphoned off to pay for corporate bailouts. Ultimately, this is about freedom. If your wealth is stored in a way that can be devalued at the flip of a switch by a central banker, you are not free. You are a serf on a digital plantation. But if you hold assets that exist outside of their control, or assets that appreciate when they debase the currency, you declare independence. You become sovereign. This is the ultimate impact of financial literacy. It's not just about getting rich. It's about not getting fleeced. It is about ensuring that the time you spend away from your family, working, is not stolen from you by invisible thieves in expensive suits. We are building a community of people who see through the smoke and mirrors. A community that understands the architecture of corruption and refuses to participate in it blindly. We are the ones who look at the hidden tax and say, "No more." We are the ones who are taking our financial destiny into our own hands. This isn't the end of the conversation. It is just the beginning of a new way of living. We need to keep sharpening our minds, sharing this knowledge, and supporting each other as we navigate this collapsing fiat paradigm. If you are ready to stop being the victim and start being the protagonist of your own financial story, I want you to confirm it right now. Go to the comments and write one powerful sentence: "I am taking my power back." Let that be your declaration of independence today. But this journey of protection goes beyond just buying assets. It requires a continuous commitment to uncovering the truth. We need to stay vigilant because the methods of extraction are constantly evolving. They will invent new words, new crises, and new excuses to print money, and we need to be ready for them. There's one final piece of this puzzle, a crucial element that ties everything together and defines the future of this channel. We've covered a lot of ground today, and I know this isn't the kind of light entertainment the algorithm usually feeds you. But the fact that you are still here, watching this right now, tells me that you are looking for something different. You are looking for the signal in the noise. If you value this kind of deep dive investigation where we don't just read the headlines but actually dismantle the machinery behind them, make sure you are subscribed. We have a lot more dossiers to open, and we are going to keep pulling at these threads until we unravel the whole sweater. And if this conversation respected your intelligence and gave you a new perspective on your own money, go ahead and hit that like button. It's a small gesture, but it's the most effective way to tell YouTube that this is the kind of content that deserves to be seen by more people. Since you made it all the way to the end, I want to know who is really in this with me. Drop a comment below with just this phrase: "I see the hidden tax." It is our little code to identify the people who actually have the attention span to seek the truth. Now, understanding inflation is just step one. There is another layer to this story, a specific historical event that set this entire system in motion. There's a video popping up on your screen right now that connects perfectly with what we just talked about and fills in the missing pieces. Click there, and let's continue this conversation on the other side.